The famous photographer and humanitarian Sebastiao Salgado was born in Brazil in 1944, where he grew up and attended the University of Sao Paulo. Sebastiao in his 20s ended up moving to Paris in 1964 after a military coup had swept Brazil. In Paris, he attended the school for economics as he was interested in economics and sociology. After finishing school, he moved once again, this time to London, where he pursued a job for the International Coffee Organization as an economist. While working for the coffee organization, he traveled to Africa for business trips and other related economical issues. It was there in Africa, Sebastiao's passion for photography bloomed. The first camera he used was his wife Leila's, which she had bought for her passion of architecture. In Africa, he fell in love with the art of photography. After falling in love with photography and the subjects he photographed, Salgado quit his job and moved back to Paris. In the early 1970s, Salgado took on photojournalism, first as a freelancer and then with some of the biggest photo agencies at the time, such as Sigma, Gamma, and Magnum Photography. Salgado would eventually start his own photo agency in 1994 called Amazonas Images. Throughout his career as a photojournalist, Salgado traveled all over the world, from Africa, Europe, to Latin America. He took photos and wrote about his adventures. His first book he completed, called Other Americas, was a project based on the indigenous Latin Americans, which was published in 1984. His second big project ensued a 6-year-long journey reporting and documenting the African famine, where he took many of his most emotional and gripping photographs. He then did another 6-year-long project spanning throughout 26 countries, where he documented large industrial manual labor. The book created from this journey, called Workers, an Archaeology of the Industrial Area, is one of his most popular works. All the previous projects led him to then document the movement of people throughout the entire world, which turned into 2 epic books called Migrations and Portraits of Children of the Migrations. These works of Sebastiao were his most famous, as they had a large impact on all who read them. His style of photography brought the people and places he photographed into the hearts of those who looked at his work. Sebastiao's unique approach and use of black and white photography was one of the many reasons he became so well known and why his work has such an impact on people. Sebastiao's subject matter and his photography evolved immensely throughout his career. Like many sociologist photographers that take pictures of people, Sebastiao spent a vast amount of time with his subjects, from spending time with people in refugee camps, job sites, to following herds of animals. Much of his early projects focused on the human side of life that was dark and depressing. Many of his subjects at this time were those of starving refugees and workers in grotesque and back-breaking environments. Years of witnessing and living side by side to the death and agony of the people he photographed throughout the world took a toll on Sebastiao. He became very ill and came down with serious infections all over his body, forcing him to see a doctor that realized that there was nothing wrong with his body. It was the pain and the suffering he witnessed and lived with while he was doing his extensive projects that was killing him. Sebastiao's style changed after learning his work covering the darker parts of humanity and taking a toll on his health. He turned his focus on to the natural world, and he set off on another 6 years long journey project beginning in 2004, which would become his most current project completed, called Genesis. Instead of like past projects covering social, economic, and cultural issues, Sebastiao traveled to some of the most remote and foreign places on Earth to document and take photos of the natural landscapes, the wildlife, and the few humans that have yet to be touched by civilization. Since turning his interest into more environmental and natural work, he He has since become a big ambassador and counsel for the protection and advancement of environmental growth. Salgado and his wife both contribute to the environmental movement. They founded a non-profit in the Brazilian state Minas Gerais, where they live on their vast farmland called Instituto Terra. Their goal has been to restore the area to its original state and to be seen as a model of excellence in the areas of restoration and environmental education. Looking at Sebastiao's life, the way he did his work, and what he did his work on really impressed me. Like him, I've always been deeply fascinated with traveling and learning about different cultures and being in nature. Learning about Sebastiao's life and his passion for photography and the conservation of the environment has only strengthened my feelings and passions for photography and traveling. Sebastiao still today continues to spend much of his time out in the field, from rebuilding rainforests to contributing to the environmental movement and practicing his craft with his camera.